It's the Sports Peninsula podcast coming up. We're looking at the 2024 NHL first round draft, first round prospects. The draft starts on Friday, June 28th at the Sphere in Las Vegas, Nevada. We also took an in-depth look at the Detroit Red Wings free agency options and how Steve Yzerman will have to manipulate his roster to try and improve, but also to keep the assets he has in part one of our series. It's been a painful week for some Red Wings fans with the Jake Walman trade, but in part two of our offseason coverage, we're looking at the top prospects of the first round, looking at who may be in play at 15 for the Red Wings. Now here is your Sports Peninsula team.
Welcome back to the Sports Peninsula podcast. Talking some Red Wings hockey here. We've had a spirited, fun, in-depth look at the cap situation and the roster from the 23-24 Red Wing team and speculated upon some things that may happen in free agency. Today, we are going to take a deep look at some prospects that the Detroit Red Wings are likely to select from the Sphere in Las Vegas this Friday, the 28th of June. Joining me is our resident co-founder and outstanding contributor to the Sports Peninsula podcast, Dave Druzinski. Drew, how are you doing this evening? I've got the NBA draft behind me percolating. The Pistons got a pick early on. I'm not quite sure what we're going to make of that one yet as the Pistons once again remake their roster. But we are talking tonight about some hockey prospects.
Yeah, we are, Coach, and thank you. Appreciate the intro. Yeah, interesting draft this year. Kind of mirrors the NBA draft a bit in terms of name recognition, or lack thereof, I should say. Really, this NBA draft's not raising the barometer for a lot of people. There's some very good players in this NHL draft, but I would say last year's probably had a little more flair in the first round. But we certainly will be talking about a guy going at pick one very briefly, but it's pretty much locked in. Otherwise, it's an interesting draft, Coach, but I don't think there's going to be an immediate impact from many of them other than maybe our first selection here. But we'll take a look at him shortly.
Yeah. And, we looked in depth. These are players that are not likely to enhance the Detroit Red Wings roster in Little Caesars Arena and the other NHL venues next year. Unlike who the Pistons are probably going to draft tonight, will be a Detroit Piston next year, and we'll likely see them in uniform. This is not the case for the Red Wings prospects that we speak of. They're going to be percolating for a while, perhaps in their junior locales or in the NCAA, if they were to join the organization as quickly as next year, it would be in the form of Toledo in the ECHL or Grand Rapids in the AHL. But we've got a bevy of prospects to take a look at here, and I'm going to start first by commending you, Drew. You put together quite an array here of guys, folks. There's a real good shot that one of these players is a Detroit Red Wing. Real good chance. So with our first pick being the 15th pick, we're right in the middle of this draft. And really, before we get started, Drew, we're not looking for something specifically, are we?
No, not at all. Because to your point, Coach, this isn't like the NBA or any or NFL drafts where you're going to get an immediate impact from everyone you take, or at least you plan to. This is much like baseball's draft, where it's very hit and miss. And it's 2 or 3 years down the road, and you hope. But you certainly got to trust your scouting staff. Your general manager's got to have a serious eye for talent to be able to see these things and these good traits in a lot of these guys. Now, some of them are very obvious, but of course, there's always underlying things. So, yeah, it's interesting. But being at 15, I'm sure everyone has their big board. But who knows who's gonna be there at 15. So we got about 18 guys we're gonna look at, Coach.
Yeah. So, I mean, kudos to you, Drew. You did your homework here and really put together a great list of guys, some of which, have some interesting names by irony that could be involved, and some names from the past in the form of second generation players here that we could be looking at as Detroit Red Wings. So without any further ado, let's take a look at our first prospect here. And, we're looking at a forward here by the name of Macklin Celebrini, played at Boston University. He's a Terrier. Solid size kid at 6'190". This league is getting bigger, just as all sports are. Across the board, we are seeing the athletes get larger and larger and larger. It's getting to the point, Drew, that really the 5'10", you see them. I mean, there are obviously a lot of those size players in the NHL, but that's a smaller player, where at one time that wasn't necessarily the case. But you've got a kid here that has gone through the NCAA ranks, got a great hockey IQ. He skates very, very well. Things that are expected by the young prospective NHL player, right, Drew? So, I mean, again, what's the likelihood of Macklin Celebrini's there at 15? If he's
0.
a generation talent, I'm not so sure that we're going to probably get him.
No, there's no chance. He's going number 1. No chance at all. Macklin Celebrini. Again, the question becomes, is he generational? It's like lately, it seems like lately in the last 10 years, we love to throw around words like great or words like hero. And does it really apply to the folks we're saying it to? I don't know. It depends on what you mean by generational. When I think of generational, I think of this is one of the top 3 players of the last 10 years in that sport, without question. He could be that, Coach. He could. I would say Connor Bedard is who was the number 1 pick last year, which was the no-brainer. He's not Connor Bedard, but I think he's maybe a more complete player. But Connor Bedard's an offensive wizard. This kid's pretty good. He's very good. He just got it all. But he plays a 200-foot game. He's compared favorably to Jonathan Toews of the Chicago Blackhawks, and that's a guy that's going to be in the Hall of Fame when 3 years after he retires. So it's a no-brainer. He's going to go number 1 without question. San Jose won the lottery, and they won the Celebrini sweepstakes. So there it is. Is
he playing with the Sharks next year?
I think he's the only one that has a legitimate shot at it, and I would say I'd be surprised if he didn't. But other than that, I'd be surprised if anyone else is in an NHL roster right away.
So this is the player. This is 1-1 right here. This is
the guy.
Macklin Celebrini, going to be a San Jose Shark or Boston Terrier maybe next year, but likely a San Jose Shark. Our second prospect that we're featuring here tonight, Artyom Levshunov. We're looking at a player, an international name here, played in the NCAA. He's a local Michigan State Spartan. Big 6'2", 210-pound right-handed defenseman. Where's he going, Drew? Do you forecast, and what's this guy's game?
Well, basically, Coach, what we did here, kind of the preface before we go forward, because Celebrini was the no-brainer. But the rest of these are ranking just based on a consensus of mock drafts that we looked at over the last couple of weeks from some publications. But it's really, I think it's safe to say Levshunov definitely could go 2. He might go 3, but I don't think he'll go lower than 3, Coach. He's a very, very talented defenseman, a right-handed shot defenseman, already has that pro size. He's already had Frozen 4 experience. I mean, he played our Broncos last year, right? And that was a thrilling game, that first round game, and I went to overtime and they beat the Broncos. But he's a very good player, strong skater, total package. He can play in all situations. He can quarterback your power play. He's a lead penalty killer. This guy's going to be a very talented player in the NHL. I think he's got a chance to be one of those guys that you're going to talk about, a perennial all-star potentially. I'm not sure he's going to. I don't think it's wise to rush him up being a defenseman. So I think the likelihood of him making an NHL team right away is not good. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it would benefit him to maybe do it, possibly another year at State, or to your point, maybe he gets that rookie deal right away and he's up in the AHL with whoever gets him. But Levshunov definitely, I would be shocked if he fell past 3. Put it that way.
So a top 3 talent in this draft. It's a two-way defenseman. Bodes well. His development keeps tracking. We're talking about a long-term NHL player.
Yeah. Here's number 3.
Well, yeah, and we're going to look at a guy by the name of Ivan Demidov. We're looking at a KHL player coming from SK St. Petersburg out of the Continental Hockey League in Russia. 5'11", 178 pounds. So you're talking about a prototypical European forward here. that can play the center and right wing positions. Got a bullet shot, quick and fast, nimble, finesse skater, great, visionary on the ice. This is your quintessential Russian prospect. Where is this guy going, David? Not to a specific team, but in a range. Where do you see Ivan Demidov going, and what type of player is he going to be?
To answer your question first, he could go number 2. I think number 3 makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any way he slips out of the top 5, Coach. I think it's safe to say he will come to America or Canada and play in the NHL. So there's no concerns there with Demidov, like we had last year with the kid that Philadelphia picked, who's actually coming over now. His name escapes me, Matt Bay. I forget it. Mitchkov. That's who it was. He's coming over now. So there were concerns about him, which is why he slipped back a bit. Not any concerns here for Demidov. Just plays a very solid offensive game. He battles hard to go on the boards, and you got to like that. And he's difficult to defend because he's got a kind of a start-stop element to his game. He's not. He definitely has a great shot, but he's got great vision. So he's able to find the open ice. He's able to find open players. So you can't rush up on him and make you look silly. You give him too much space, he's going to get you with the shot. So he's a very good hockey player. Definitely top 5 in this draft. Likely at 3, possibly as high as 2.
Is he coming over next year, do you think? Maybe I know you kind of cleared the air there pretty quickly about him maybe staying. That's kind of a dilemma when you draft somebody out of the KHL, more so than any of the other European hockey leagues like Liga or the Swedish Elite League or the Finnish League. They tend to compete for the talent a little bit more in the KHL to stay. All indications are that he would be free and willing to come. Do you see that? Do you see him as a guy that's playing in the NHL next year?
No, I don't think he'll be in the NHL, Coach. He could be in the team's pipeline, playing in the AHL or ECHL, to your point earlier. But a guy like Demidov being in the KHL, I mean, if I'm the team that drafts him and I know he's not going to make my team, I'd probably let him stay there if he's able to for a year. That's a great league to play in. He's getting pro experience at a level that's equal to and probably slightly above the AHL. I mean, there's NHL talent over there that are playing there right now. So I mean, it's a very, very, very good league. So yeah, I don't think there's any concerns about him coming over, again, to preface it, but definitely top 5. But it might behoove him to stay in the KHL for a year.
Okay. Well, moving forward, we are talking about now a guy from Western Canada, and Caden Lindstrom. Nice rangy player. Doggone it, this is the type of player that would look good with a red winged wheel on his chest. We're talking the Western Hockey League out of Medicine Hat. He's a forward, big, long player, good hockey IQ, has gotten a little banged up in his day. Some different things to consider with that. However, real rangy, long player. Tell me more about Caden Lindstrom, Drew.
Love his size, love his versatility to be able to play all 3 forward spots. I mean, obviously, he's going to find a home with whoever drafts him at a point. I see him as a winger. I don't see him as a center. But I see him. His speed and his size, I mean, real tough to defend, but he knows how to get himself open. So I see him with that kind of size. He could be hanging around at the top of the circle. I see him down low on power plays. I could see him clearing out some space in front of the net on power plays a lot. The injury history, I haven't seen anything that, I mean, I know he has a history, but I haven't seen anything that's super concerning. So I don't believe Caden Lindstrom slips out of the top 5. He's in. If he does, it's because there's an issue in my mind. Because if just his body of work and his literally his physical body and his skill set, he's top 5 all the way. I've seen him anywhere between 3, 4, and 5, pretty much in that range. Again, anything can happen in the NHL draft, but man, he's a total package there, and I I think he's one of those guys that if he's in the right situation, coach, you can give a guy a look-see for about 8-9 games, but then they'll lose their junior eligibility if you keep them any long. I believe it's 8 games the threshold. You don't want to play any more than that, but you could see someone like that get Lindstrom getting an opportunity, but likely stays at Medicine Hat for another season. But man, lot to like about Caden Lindstrom.
So no delusions of grandeur. If he slips, he's going to slip maybe into the upper 8, 9, 10 range, and maybe that'd be about as far.
Yeah, no chance for the Wings here. I don't believe. Too much talent and too much upside here. For that ceiling is way high for Lindstrom. I think he's gonna be a really good pro. Really good pro. Now we got our number 5 guy.
Yep, we're moving on. Anton Salayev. Now look at this size. Another KHL player. Yeah. 6'7", 207 pounds. Now we have a defenseman in our pipeline that's of similar size that we expect to see in Detroit next year in the form of Simon Edvinsson. Is this the type of player we're looking at here?
Ooh, that's a great. That's who I compared him to in my mind, coach. Watching some highlights of him and seeing his size, because you're right, he's very similar to Edvinsson. Although Edvinsson has a little more meat on the bones. I think that's the issue here. 6'7", 207. He can easily put on 20 pounds, and you probably won't even notice it. But the opposition will when he's putting the body on him. So. He's a good skater. He shows a lot of offensive potential. His game's growing, much like his height, right? At worst, he should be a real tough defender. It's going to log a lot of ice time. So his floor to me is a solid top, probably second pair defenseman who's going to be a really good penalty killer. His upside, his ceiling, maybe he's a quarterback on one of your power play units, and he's going to help you offensively too. But defensively, I think he's a really safe pick. No way he slips out of the top 10, not with that size. There's no concerns here about getting him over here from the KHL either, coach. So just a real solid prospect, but it's hard to pinpoint what he's really going to be. But I think it's safe to say with that floor, he's a very safe pick for any team.
No, I mean, a puck-moving, responsible, accountable defenseman that has, two-way potential at 6'7". And he's a Russian prospect that is willing to come. That doesn't sound like a guy that's going to get out of the top 5 likely. So, I mean, they're probably we've got him ranked here at our 5th ranked prospect. Likelihood he sticks right in and around that area, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty consistent. Plus or minus 2 spots depending on the situation. But yeah, I couldn't. Like you said, there's no way he's slipping out of the top 10. I'd be really surprised if he slipped below 7. Yeah, it's pretty safe.
Well, let's take a look at the number 6 prospect, and we have that in Zeev Byam.
It's actually pronounced Buyam.
Buyam.
I had to look it up. Yep, Buyam.
Buyam. Sorry, this is not my. I'm calling these names, and this is not my department. So
you're doing good.
So I'm doing what I can here. But the University of Denver, which is a great hockey program over there. Colorado College and the University of Denver are kind of the 2 premier college programs in that state. And, that's Western Michigan, but we're talking about the university. I'm talking about state of Colorado.
I was talking about the NCHC. That's what the conference, because they're all
that. I was sticking with the state there. So sorry for getting crossed up there. But let's talk about Mr. Byam. Sorry.
Yeah, so and he's got an NCAA championship. 6 foot, 186 pounds. Left-handed defenseman. Like you said, he's got a lot of good experience with a very good program, and he played. Being able to win a championship, that's huge. He's competitive. He's a good puck handler. Great skater. He's shifty, makes you miss, and the guy knows how to win. He knows how to win. I think there's I think this Buyam's probably a top 4 pairing guy. He's going to help you on the power play. Might be the second unit, but he's going to help you. But what I like about him is he's able to move the puck quickly out of his zone, and he's pretty good. His first pass is pretty good too, coach, getting out of his zone. That's really important to be responsible on your own end. But he's got good offensive upside too. So Again, another guy, I being a defenseman and having that much skill, not going out of the top 10, could crack the top 5. But again, it's so hard to really pinpoint. But this is where he's coming in at 6, and it makes sense.
Zeev Buyum, sorry for butchering it. If I could redo a pick, I would redo this one. I don't like how this one turned out. So let's go to 7.
All right. Oh, good luck with this. I can help you with this. Zane Parekh.
Go for it, Drew. Keep rolling, man.
It's Zane Parekh. Yeah, he's from the Saginaw Spirit and an OHL coach, and they just won the Memorial Cup. First American team to win the Memorial Cup. And good for Saginaw, good for the town, and a big deal. I mean,
absolutely, that's fantastic.
For those watching that aren't that familiar with junior hockey in the Canadian Hockey League, you've got the Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, and then the Quebec Major Junior League. The champions of those conferences, along with the host team, will host the 4-team playoff for the Memorial Cup for the Canadian Hockey League, which is all the junior leagues. And Saginaw, what a hell of an accomplishment. But this Parekh's arguably the most talented offensive defenseman this year. And and that's huge. He's a power play specialist, a quarterback. Here's the thing: he's got to show that he's improving his game in his own end. He's very offensive, and here's what scares me, Coach. And you've seen this in football a lot, right? And when you're that good at every level, you keep going up. You tend to maybe slacken some areas because you can make up for it with your speed or your quickness or whatever. Or maybe you're just Eric Lindros comes to mind. He never learned to skate with his head up. He didn't have to until he had the misfortune of playing in the Atlantic Division against Scott Stevens 8 times a year. That's all it took. So I think here what we need is, and definitely Parekh's he might stay with Saginaw another year. They might get him in the system, whoever gets him right away, but he's definitely going to have to work on his defensive game. But there's no doubt in my mind, Coach, he's going to be a top 4 guy and a quarterback on a power play. His ceiling, though, he could be a star. He really could. He's a very, very good defenseman. And if you put him with the right stay-at-home partner, wow, look out. So lots to like here about him.
Well, yeah, he just has to become somewhat accountable for what takes place coming back into his own zone. Or, we've seen a player like Shane Gostisbehere, thrive in the league, but he's going to bounce around quite a bit. And, that value, is certainly there in the form of points. But, you're a blue liner they call you a blue liner for a reason. And you've got to be able to defend what's behind it. And, best of luck to this young guy. Sounds like he could really, really add some firepower to an organization from an offensive standpoint. Once he matches up a little bit more at the professional level as a defenseman, sounds like this guy's, really worthy of a top 10 pick.
Yeah, and his size is not bad. I mean,
6 foot 181. That's probably the going rate these days.
And I like how you brought up Gostisbehere too, because I think that's a good comparison. I think that honestly, that type of player is his floor in my mind, potentially. So that's a good guy.
He's going to play for a while in the league if he just hits his floor. So top 10 pick for sure coming out of the OHL. And congratulations to him and the Saginaw Spirit for winning the Memorial Cup. I mean, that's a coveted Canadian hockey junior trophy. Played in and around Memorial Day in that general area, beginning of June. Crossing over Western Hockey League, Ontario Hockey League, Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and the Saginaw Spirit. Pull it out. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So anyway, let's move on to number 8, and we're staying in the OHL and we're staying on defense. This time for a left-handed defenseman, a big 6'3", 394-pound Canadian prospect by the name of Sam Dickinson. Drew, take it away.
Yeah. Now, this is a young man. He's starting to really get a good point shot going. That wasn't his game per se coming into the OHL with the London Knights, but it's starting to develop. We saw a lot of good things last year. If you look at his highlights, you start to see it's coming around. He's got good size and skating ability. Love his size, 6'3" and 194, and having good coordinated mobility. Gotta love that. The question is, can he develop into a top 4 defenseman? I don't think there's any doubt his floor is he's going to be a top 6 staple with whoever gets him. He's going to be a really good, solid defenseman. But I think his ceiling, yeah, maybe he is on a second power play unit. He's got to be able to kill penalties. I think he's got the skill set and the size to do so. So a very solid defenseman here. I would say based on talent alone, coach, he should be a top 10 pick. The only thing I would say is if there's teams in these spots that are more forward needy, that could force a Sam Dickinson down. But defensemen are always coveted in the draft, as you know. And if a team can get a good, solid defenseman, they're going to go with that all day long. So I'd be mildly surprised if he slipped out of the top 10, but I think it would be circumstantial based on team needs per se and their pipeline. Not for immediate help, but like to fill their pipeline.
Now, you said something interesting. You don't think he's a prospect that slips out of the top 10. If he does, we're at 15. We're not too far outside of the top 10. Would this be a type of player you'd try to move up into the 11 or 12 area if he was still there?
That is a great question. I think you kick the tires. I don't admittedly have the in-depth knowledge of these guys to say that you would definitely do that. Steve Yzerman has done it. You know, he that's how they got Sebastian Kosa. They've been able to do that. I would be intrigued by Dickinson, no question about that. If the Red Wings like him that much, yeah, it's a possibility. It's a distinct possibility. But yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because the rest of the guys we're talking about very well could somehow slip to 15. Because we talked about, remember last year, Nate Danielson at 17. Well, they ended up getting him at 9. The Red Wings did, and everyone was like, "Whoa, wait a minute, pretty damn good hockey player." And then Sandin Pellikka at 17, who pretty damn good hockey player too. And we could see both of those guys not this year, but next year in Detroit. So yeah, Sam Dickinson, he's someone to definitely look at. Love the size though, and if he can develop his shot even more, it just makes him all that much better. Go overall and intriguing to go after, I would say.
Well, as we trend here to the back of our top 10 here in our top 10 prospects here, in our NHL draft preview, we have a name from the past here. Another, this is all of sports really. We see a lot of offspring. We've seen it in baseball, and we continue to see it in baseball. We've certainly seen it in basketball. We were talking about it tonight with Bronny James likely going in the second round sometime. We've never really seen NBA players play with their sons. So that hasn't happened, but we've seen multi-generational players. Happens in the NFL quite a bit as well, but not quite at the frequency it does in the NHL. You see it all the time, where you saw, Kachuk, and the Kachucks, celebrate the other day.
Exactly.
Jerome McGinley was a phenomenal player. It really, kind of broke a lot of thresholds and really was a major, milestone player in NHL history. Is this Tej Iginla?
Yep, you got it.
185 pounder now. If I'm not mistaken, he's a little bigger than his dad as far as height.
I think they're pretty close. I know he doesn't weigh as much. Dad's a little bit bigger.
Dad was a strong built, kind of a Martin Lapointe sized player.
Very good.
But we're talking about a guy that, Jerome did the vast majority of his career in Calgary. So, Tej is a Western Hockey League guy out of Kelowna. A forward like Dad, can see it a little bit in his face. Talk to us about Tej Iginla, Drew, and could this guy get to 15?
No, because ironically at 9, the Calgary Flames are selecting.
Wouldn't that be something?
Well, many, and honestly, it makes a lot of sense. It's almost like to compare it. It was like when Aiden Hutchinson was available for the Lions at number 2. It just makes too much sense. But he deserved to be picked there, and Tej Iginla deserves to be picked at 9. He's a very good hockey player. He's tough on the puck, especially in the offensive zone. He's a very good skater. He's a very slick stick handler. Jerome was a power forward. Dad was a power forward who wasn't afraid to drop the gloves either if he needed to. Tej's game is not quite like that, but man, an offensive threat at all times on the ice. The issue is the back checking and the forechecking. He's got to improve his 200-foot game. He's got to be a little more pesky on the opposition. He's got to be able to back check and make sure he's responsible in that sense. Not sure if he's going to be a center or a wing primarily. Certainly, if he's a center, that's got to improve. So I see him more as a wing, not a center. I think if you're going to be a center, you know how that goes, Coach. You got to play that 200-foot game. So I think this is a very talented player. Could go before 9. Again, he's a guy I don't see him slipping to Detroit at 15. But I would be surprised if Calgary passed on him. I think it would have to be a situation where maybe one of those, maybe like a Silyev slipped down to them and they'd have a tough choice to make. And, to get Anton Silyev at 9 would be something else. But if everything lines up properly, and I think it probably will, TJ Ginla's likely a Calgary Flame, and that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's fairy tale stuff. And that'd be really cool for that family. To have that, and it's certainly, we've seen that. We've seen sometimes the youth, the offspring play for that team that their dad had played for as well. So that would be pretty cool. But it does sound like he's got a little work to do, become a little bit more of a complete player. Got to stick his nose and do some back checking and play a little bit of defense too. So we'll see where TJ Ginla goes. But it does sound like if not by 9, certainly it will likely could well be at number 9. Our number 10 prospect, Drew, staying in the Western Hockey League and also with the forwards, Berkeley Catton, 5'11", 163. This is more of I guess your kind of traditional sized forward. Nowadays with today's modern, training techniques, 163 is not going to do. 163 is not going to do. No. That's going to have to get up into the 180s. And it will. But you see a center here?
And that's the question. And that's definitely the question. I think he has the ability. He's got the speed. But you got to improve your game on the back end. So when you're questioning back checking, when you're questioning defensive responsibility of a forward, my answer is no. That's not who I don't want any question marks at center. My center's got to be either offensive dynamos or 200-foot guys. But Berkeley Catton's a very talented player. He's highly skilled. Whether he's a center or not, I guess that might impact his draft slotting depending on the team that's there, whether they need to fill that part of their pipeline or not. It's one of those things. But definitely has to improve his game on the back end. He's got to get stronger, to your point, put on about 20 pounds. But he's got a high offensive ceiling. If Berkeley Catton in 2 or 3 years comes in at 5'11", 185 with that skill set, now you got a good hockey player. You got a top 2 line guy who's going to definitely give you, I think, at worst, good secondary scoring. But maybe he's one of your guys he's one of the guys you build around. But definitely a chance to go at 10. Could go a little higher. He could be in play for the Red Wings at 15. I would, again, I'd be a little surprised at that. And again, I always get concerned when I hear that there's issues playing a 200-foot game. I mean, that's just, unless you're Patrick Kane, not real interested in that. But I think Berkeley Catton, with his skill set, I think he can do it, Coach. And at the end of the day, I think I'd be surprised if he's available at 15. But we see him going in around the 10th spot.
And that would be intriguing. That would be intriguing if we see this name in and around that number 15. And like you said, his size is something that can be built upon. His lack of attentiveness in his own zone is something that he'll be working on as well. So these are some things that can refine too. And that rounds out our top 10. Now we're moving into territory, I would have to believe, where we're talking about guys that could be a Detroit Red Wing.
Absolutely.
Let's start at number 11 with Konsta Helenius, 5'11", 181-pound wing center forward. Again, we're talking about a player size-wise, probably projecting a little bit more to what we're looking with the prospect we just addressed.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about a Finnish forward, though, here, Drew. What do you get with Helenius?
Well, you got a guy who's playing well in the top Finnish men's league at Liga Jukurit, I believe that's how it's pronounced, and that's a well-known organization in the Finnish league. But he played very well there in the top men's league. He's got top 6 forward potential, which is what you always want. He may perhaps have the best hockey sense of all the forwards in this draft. He's playing in the men's league. He's got the pro size you need right now. So at the end of the day, I think Helenius could crack the top 10. If he's at 15, I think you seriously consider him. There's no doubt about it. Helenius is a very good player. I would be mildly surprised if he's there, but at the end of the day, this is a guy that's got more experience than others, and they have that kind of hockey sense. That's good enough for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, could he also pop up into the top 10?
Yeah, he could. He absolutely could. I think he may be closer to going to the NHL than most of the guys we're talking about.
Size-wise, it looks that way to me.
Yeah, size-wise and being in the Finnish Elite League. Yeah, I mean, you're talking maybe potentially a year in the AHL and then off we go if he keeps progressing the way he has. And so far, I mean, he's on a track to be that way. So if you can get a top 6 forward out of getting Helenius, you are in good shape.
We shall see where Helenius goes from the Sphere on Friday in Las Vegas. Over to number 12, going back to the Western Hockey League. And we're talking about from the Calgary Hitmen, we're talking about a defenseman. And this is a nice looking sized player with 6 foot, 394 pound Carter Yakmachuk. What do we have in this guy, Drew? And man, I like hearing these numbers. I like seeing what we talk about here. 120 penalty minute guy, Canadian hockey player, North American prospect. Could he, this is what do we got with this young man?
Well, he's feisty and he's physical. And what's great is he's got a huge shot, and he's, like I say, he's not afraid to mix it up. Now the key is 2 things. He needs to improve his skating, and I think the reason he's not in the top 10 is because he's really not an instinctive defenseman. I mean, we haven't seen that. That's not to say he's not a good defenseman. It's just there's some guys that we've had Nicky Lidstrom here in Detroit. We've seen guys like that, like Rafalski, like Kronwall. But I'll tell you what, with that size, that right-handed shot, and the physicality, I would be pretty excited if he somehow slipped to Detroit at 15. I'd be a little surprised if he did. And again, I think he's only falling to 12 and around the 12 range in a lot of mock drafts because he's not the most skilled skater or defensive defenseman. But at the same time, I don't believe he's a liability at all. And I like guys that you need to keep your head up on the ice. And I think Carter Yakimchuk brings that to any team he's going to be drafted by. Probably another year in the WHL with the Hitmen there for Bret Hart's club, and then off we go. But good player.
Well, and again, I mean, he definitely could use some seasoning. I mean, just because you're a long, tough kid that can kind of lay the boom doesn't make you a good defenseman in the NHL. So, I mean, there's a little percolating. It seems like he has to go with here, but Mr. Yakimchuk's going to be an NHL player before long. But moving over to 13 here, Drew. Now this is what I've been waiting to talk about because we're talking at pick. We're not talking about pick 13. We're talking about the 13th ranked prospect on a wonderful list that you put together that is likely to be quite accurate. But we're talking about a forward by the name of Yzerman. And it's no relation to Steve. Matter of fact, it's not spelled anything like it. This is an American-born player, but a 6 foot, 196 pound forward by the name of Yzerman. What can you tell me about him except that he played 23 years for the Detroit Red Wings?
Yeah, and is the general manager right now. Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, now we're talking about a guy who's in play here at 50.
Could Yzerman draft Yzerman?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Matter of fact, I think I believe one of the publications in Detroit just did a preview. I want to say it was the News, and I don't know if they picked them to go to Detroit in their mock draft, but I know they were reviewing them today. But what's ironic is here we are. We're talking about our first USDP player. Last year and the year before, they were setting records in terms of how many were drafted in the top 10. So that, there's always going to be peaks and valleys. It seems like it's the WHL's year this year, at least in the top 15. But Cole Yzerman is a very good player. He's already got the size you need. Now here's the thing. He's got a wicked shot. I mean, he's arguably the best goal scorer in the draft. I would highly recommend people take a look at his highlights and his shot. It's nasty. Now he's got to get better skating. He's not an instinctive scorer, so he's not going to make highlight real plays. But you know what? Who cares? He's got a cannon shot and he knows how to put it in the net. That's what matters. As long as you can.
Those are guys that wind up 50-point guys, very easy.
Now, here's the deal. Here's what I saw, Coach. In reading and scouting reports and what I saw, he needs to trust his teammates and not be a one-man show. Now, how often we see this, when you're a young kid and you've got a talent, you tend to carry the play, right? You're a ball hog, a puck hog, right? But that's how we would call them. I don't know what the kids are calling them now, but that's what we call them, right? Is that even politically correct to say anymore? I don't know. But bottom line, sometimes that's out of necessity, though. Now, maybe I don't know his complete background, but I mean, when you feel like you're in a situation where you really got to make it happen, sometimes you take on too much and then you try to do too much and it can burn you. It happens in any sport. So I think now, mind you, I think that's something you can coach out of a guy pretty quick. And I don't know, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Coach, because when you've got a guy, I know you're a football coach, but sports are sports. When you got a guy that's that dominant, how do you get a guy to trust their teammates?
Well, I've not worked with too many players that have been that dominant, and that's no shake at the great players that I've gotten to coach. I've coached great team guys, and I've gotten to coach in programs that have really great team concepts. So, that's a blessing for me as far as my experience goes. But in regards to what I think when you talk of these things, these aren't issues he's going to have to worry about at the NHL level. I doubt Cole Yzerman will ever be the best player on the ice at any given time in the NHL. So he had better learn rather quickly to be a teammate and to work within the flow of things and get in and fit in a little bit. If he can't do that, I doubt he's selected anywhere near the 13th pick, because it will basically be he is kind of a capped player. If a guy is going to be that individually focused on his ability, can no longer carry him being a coast to coast puck handle to shoot player, a la Connor McDavid or a Patrick Kane, then he is likely to play a long time in the AHL. So, what we shall see. I would think that those would be some things that are starting to kind of fade from his game as he progresses through and gets into higher levels of competition and steeper, more talented levels of competition. But I mean, he's a real intriguing name. The U.S. developmental program is really on the up and up. We're doing some great things. Trey Augustine, one of our goaltenders, is the goaltender for the U.S. National Development Team, also a Michigan State Spartan. I am guessing Cole Yzerman would spend some time at a university and percolate a little bit. However, if that is an issue, as you say, Drew, maybe we need to get him in a Toledo or a Grand Rapids quicker, so he plays with the caliber of talent that's going to kind of wean that mentality out of his repertoire.
Well, I'll tell you this: he's not committed to a university, so I don't believe. So I think
he's the guy that wants to sign them.
Yeah, this is a guy that's going to get into the fold right away. But to your point, it may be in the ECHL before the AHL. But he's got a lot of talent. I mean, like I said, I encourage everyone to look at his highlights, because I mean, wow, he's got a shot. I'm not saying it's the best shot I've ever seen, but it's pretty nasty. It's something you want that on a power play. I'll tell you that. That's someone I'm camping out at the top of the circle, and I want him ready to let it go. So lots to like about Cole Yzerman. He could be in play at 15.
Very well, which would be really intriguing for Red Wings fans. But now we're getting the guys that are even likely to be more in play at 15. And you know, folks, David put together a phenomenal list here. You know, we're talking about players, you know, in and around the players that we have talked about are going to probably go either before or at this general area. So now when we talk about Beckett Senecki, out of the OHL, right winger, 6'2", 281-pounder, good sized kid. You know, kind of a good playmaker. You know, long, good skating, smart player. Now we're really starting to get a feel for someone that could wear our sweater someday. But with Beckett Senecki, what and where is he going to be? We see a potential top 6 forward, I see. But what kind of time frame are we talking about here?
I would say 3 years. I think that's fair. Another year in junior, a couple years in the AHL. But I would expect in year 4, this is a young man that's going to be like a top 6 forward on your club. A good right winger. Sometimes tries to be a little too finite or perfect at times, and you know that sometimes, you know, it's like get the puck and get rid of it, you know, or whatever, you know, make the play. But he's a gifted playmaker, so you got to like that. You know, again, that's something that's plagued the Red Wings a little bit. And we talked about it in part 1 when we did the free agency preview yesterday that we published here on YouTube. And you check that on our channel. But, you know, you're 9th in scoring, 9th in power play percentage, but 24th in shot in total shots taken. So you're not going to score. I mean, you're gifted and blessed to score that often, taking that few shots. So I think Seneca's got to understand that. But I think with that much talent and that much ability, he'll figure it out pretty quick. I'll tell you what, Beckett Seneca would be a nice pick at 15. He could be there too. Definitely like his game, playing in the OHL with Oshawa. You know, you gotta. We have an affinity for the OHL. That's our league. So, but anyways, a top 6 forward, I think is safe. He could be a guy that's. I think he could be an assist machine. I think we're talking about maybe a 60, 70 point guy potentially per year, who's going to be very, very valuable, especially on the power play, setting up shop there. So I think Seneca's a nice player.
The 3 S's, you know, size, speed, skill. Size, speed, skill. Size, speed, skill. Those are the 3 things you need to have. 23 skaters on your roster. We're going to take the goalies out of it. We won't put size, speed, and skill on. We don't need to see speed out of our goaltenders as far as their skate stride. Yeah. If our goaltenders are fast skaters and they're going to get off the ice fast on power plays, that's great. But you know, size and skill, of course. But size, speed, and skill for our forwards and defensemen. We need as many of those players as we can get. We see ourselves games 30 through 75, 80. That can be an issue for the Red Wings. We get out-muscled. We get outworked a little. I'm not saying out-hustled, but just there's a bigger, longer, better player getting the pucks that we're not getting to.
Yep.
Or making us force the issue, bullying us and pushing us around. At times, that happens.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, we could use as many types of players as Beckett Senecki is. So I'm intrigued by him. Let's talk about the guy. If it all falls in perfectly, Drew, this is who you're saying is going to the Detroit Red Wings right here. I'm just teasing. Yeah. I'm not putting that on you. But
yeah,
I'm going to let you go right ahead because this is the 15th prospect. Could this be a Detroit Red Wing?
Absolutely. Adam Juracek, playing in the Czechia league, and he's on the Pizan Hockey Club. Right-handed defenseman, like his size, 6'2", needs to put on a little weight, 168 there. But here's the thing: he's had a couple of knee injuries, but he skates with all-around good speed and agility. So, and we got a guy, Robbie Fabry, who's had 3, and actually one on both. So I'm a little concerned about that, but not terribly. But he's got top 4 potential. He's got to get stronger and faster. You get stronger, to me, that weight's got to go on those quads and hammies and those calves to protect that knee. You build around that knee, and you're good to go. Steve Yzerman hurt his knee in 1988. I think he played till 2006. So it can be done. Again, this isn't, hockey a little different than any of the other sports for that matter. Knee injuries are very impactful. They're certainly impactful in hockey, but a little different. So I'm mildly concerned about it. But again, I don't have the medicals. We don't have the medicals. So all things being equal, if the knee's good, oh yeah, this would be a nice guy to have. Nice prospect, good all around player. Again, top 4 potential, can do a lot of good things. But I really like his speed and his ability to, and again, to headman the puck. He's good at bringing it out of his own zone. He makes nice passes out of his zone to keep in good safe passes. I watched a lot of clips of him. Actually, he's a nice player, coach. I think he'd look good in Detroit. Not sure he's going to be the guy, but he would look good.
Yeah, I just, I see 168. I see multiple knee injuries, and I see a left eye that looks like it was busted up for him a little bit there in this photo. Let's maybe eat a little more spinach at the dinner table, and maybe work the Nautilus machine a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I, that's not fair. But hey, a fast move again, size, speed, and skill. Size, speed, and skill. He's fast. We want to protect that with those knee injuries, but he's fast, skilled defenseman. We'll take him all day. And really, he would come in at a time which you'd be looking to probably recycle a little bit. We're pretty good at defensemen. Like you said, I don't know if there is much room for our defensemen. It looks like it's going to be Johansson and Edvinsson that make the climb.
Oh, yeah.
And, so, I mean, we're not talking about, maybe we're talking at least 3 years before we're probably looking at one of the young defensemen to be moving on from. So, that certainly makes sense. Not that I would have any indicator. I butchered half the names in this thing. To know where we'd go at 15, it's a little bit more out of my domain, just because, I have a little bit more of a sense in the NFL draft than I would with projecting at this level. Probably be even a little bit better about the draft that's going on behind my back. So if I'm turning my back, I'm listening to Drew, but I'm wanting to see the Pistons get their hands on the UConn center. As of right now, it's still alive. But, Adam Juracek is a player that would certainly be welcome at a time in which we get our goaltending and forwards really aligned. He could be a player that could pop in maybe 3-4 years down the road and be developed. But I want to talk about the guy, and I'm going to let you do the majority of the talking, because this is the guy that you have seen kind of by and large forecasted to the Red Wings. Michael Brandstad-Nygaard out of he's in Norway, played in the Swedish Elite League, right, Drew?
Yeah, and
200-pounder. Talk about him, Drew. And folks, David did his homework. If you kind of forecast a lot of things, would you say this guy has one of the higher likelihoods of being a Red Wing?
Yeah, actually, if I had to say who I think they'll take, it's Brandstad-Nygaard. And here's the thing. I think the only reason he's down this low on the list is because he's probably got a lower ceiling than the guys we've talked about already, because he's really projecting to be a role-playing third-line wing. Now, then you're talking about guys like Dallas Drake, like Martin Lapointe, like Darren Helm, guys like that who can certainly play a 200-foot game, certainly can be physical, and can put the puck in the net too. He's got a good shot. He works hard, and he's a good skater. Being from Norway, playing in the Swedish Elite League, if I'm not mistaken, he would be, I believe, the first Norwegian picked in the first round. But I believe I thought I read that. Don't quote me. I probably shouldn't even said it, but I think it's a big deal if that's the case.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, 6'1", 200-pounder can play, and is going to be a wing. A left or a right wing, but at the same time, he could be a red wing as well. And this is a guy that this is the kind of player they need. I think he's a Kirk Maltby comes to mind with a little more of a scoring pop. I think that kind of looks like Kirk Maltby a little bit. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be physical, finishes checks. It doesn't. Not talking about fighting. The game's different. The Bruise Brothers days, the Prober Coaster days, those were great. And God bless all of them. But the game's not going to be like that anymore. But guys like Brandstad-Nygaard have a definite place in the NHL. And again, does he have 40, 50 goal potential? No. But he's got a high floor and he's got a low ceiling, but I think he's a very safe pick and kind of type of guy the Red Wings need, like I said.
Well, I mean, and he's already playing in Sweden. Is he 19, David, or 18?
I think he's 18.
He's 18. So you are probably talking about a 3-year projection. We're talking about a ceiling, listening to Drew and some of the talks that he's a 7 to 12 guy. Typically is one of your forwards, could become a mainstay, long-term type guy that is always workable under the cap. Somebody that's not going to surpass $5-6 million, probably more in the $4 million a year range earner. So I mean, if you can develop a player like Nygaard for a few years, whether he stays and plays in the Swedish Elite League for another year, and then comes here and plays for a couple of years in Grand Rapids. And then we're talking about a 9-10 year career in Detroit as a 7 through 12 staple. Then we're talking about a great fit. So again, what we're going to get at 15 is somebody you're not going to be thinking about a lot. You're not going to be thinking about a lot when it comes to playing next year or the year after that. But this is a player that we should account for and count on. Where was Mr. Larkin drafted? What pick was he?
17.
We're talking about the 15th pick.
Yeah.
So, we're not talking about a player that's going to be forgotten immediately.
No, it's a really good point, Coach. A really good point.
Well, as we move down the back end here, we have Michael. It's Hagee, right? That's how it's pronounced.
Yeah,
Hage, Michael Hage, out of the University of Michigan, are going to be out of the University of Michigan, out of the USHL, Chicago Steel last year. Nice size boy, 161, 190 pounder. He skates well, which is obviously an indicator that he's a modern style player. He's got the size and speed, the skill. Talk about us, Drew. What do we see in Hagee?
Well, one thing I will correct myself, Larkin was a 15th overall pick, which is why it gives people some solace. Like, okay, we're picking at 15th now. Got Dylan Larkin at 15 a few years ago, so that's pretty good. Michael Hage is in the mix there as well. Now, he played in the United States Hockey League for Chicago last year, and he's going to be a Wolverine this year, and I think that's a great thing. And I'm shocked for this the first Wolverine we're talking about, to be honest with you. But again, everything's got to churn through, right? But this Hage really played well in the United States Hockey League. He's a good skater. Got to get stronger, even though he's got some good size. Probably upper body needs to improve a little bit. Be a little harder on the puck. He's got the frame to do that. But he's definitely projecting to be a second line center. So I'm thinking this is the type of guy who could possibly become. I'm going to bring up a name that in Detroit probably didn't hit expectations, but with the Islanders, he certainly did, was Franz Nielsen. A good two-way player who's going to get you 20 to 25 goals and 20 to 25 assists a year and can play in an excellent penalty killer, good on the faceoffs too, good on the draws. So, Hage's got a lot of potential. He's a possible Red Wing. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was one of Kenny Holland's last ones. And Franz Nielsen was supposed to be a dynamo, a great face-off guy, a guy that's just if you get yourself into a shootout, you want Franz Nielsen, and an assist machine and a top six forward that didn't quite pan out. But little seasoning at the University of Michigan is going to help out Mr. Hagee too. Wrapping things up with the 18th prospect. Sorry, Drew. A guy I know that you liked when you did your research here in Stein Solberg, a left-handed shooting defenseman out of Farjestad, out of the Swedish Elite League.
Yeah.
And this guy is kind of climbing up. Is this someone that could be way up the board? Could this somebody that flies way up into the top 15, even top 10?
No, I don't believe that'll happen, but I think he's an intriguing guy to talk about. And when
great size,
physical guy. And there's, like I said, I think I talked about earlier, he wasn't even in the first round on the ESPN mock that I saw, and I'm not sure who the author of that was, but I saw it on ESPN, and he wasn't in their first round. He distinguished himself last year in the playoffs when he was in Norway. He played very well in the men's league there. He's going to get a shot in the Swedish hockey league now coming up next year. So there's a lot to like about him, and I think there's a lot of potential there. I think it might be a little bit too much of a gamble, but I wanted to put a wild card in here to talk about before we wrap it up, because he's got a lot of potential. And again, it's easy to spot a guy who's playing very well at a high level, but needs to put on some pounds. And can they handle the rigors and the physicality of the NHL? Not the case with Solberg. It's the opposite. Can he keep developing these skills? He's kind of a late bloomer in that regard. So he could be a Red Wing. He's kind of one of those guys. He's going to be all over the board. It's going to depend on the team and again, the pipeline need, but everyone needs defensemen, and 6'2", 200 pounds, a good average size defenseman, especially with good skating ability. So Solberg's interesting. We'll just leave it at that.
When you're looking at that as your foundation, and pardon me, I went not looking away. The Detroit Pistons are on the clock, and I believe their pick is in. So we are anxiously awaiting that as well. But when you have that kind of size as your foundation, there's a lot of intrigue there. And if you can bring something to the table, whether you're a great puck mover, you can quarterback and point a power play, you're just locked down in your own zone. I tell you what, that's a foundation to build upon. So Stein Solberg is a guy that I think would be intriguing for the Red Wings at the 15th pick. Well, Drew, tremendous work here, my friend. You put together a tremendous list. Give me, if you have, we covered 18 players, and we know that there's a good probably 10, 12 of them that are not likely to be Red Wings, probably going a little bit before that time. Who would you like to see the Red Wings select?
Well, Nygaard makes the most sense to me. Cole Yzerman certainly does as well. Seneca, I like as well. I think he's interesting. But Yakimchuk really caught my eye too. So I like his physicality and his size, being 6'3" and not afraid to mix it up a little bit. So, but Coach, being honest, Steve Yzerman might take somebody we didn't talk about, and you know what? That's okay. I just want to say
more Seider.
Yeah, exactly. Now Seider projected to be a 10 to 15 range pick, and then they took him at 6. So it was a bit of on paper, a bit of a reach, but not a tremendous reach. But bottom line is, getting back to wrap this up, I know there's a lot of angst with the fans. I mean, they want to, the fans overall love Steve Yzerman. Most are not questioning or bailing, but hey, let's face it, it has been 5 years and they haven't made the playoffs. I think after this season, this is not make or break for Steve Yzerman, but at the end of the day, I think we're going to say, if we see improvement, but I think there's a bigger move down the road here, Coach. There's just the posturing that's happening. People say, well, why didn't you trade Hull Hull or Mata? Well, Justin Hull has the same cap hit as Jake Walman. Who would you rather have?
Oh yeah, I mean, no one's going to want. Yeah,
I mean, when people ask those questions, ask yourself that question. If I'm the team trading with Detroit, who do I want? Jake Walman. I do question why they had to throw a second round pick in the mix to that. I'll be honest with you. But again, Yzerman's so wise. He got that pick in the earlier trade of Andrew Gibson. So he just took that pick and said, okay, well, here you go. Because they've got a second round pick still. It's not like they don't have one. That was Tampa's pick that they got from Nashville, I believe. And then they traded that to San Jose. So again, we weren't in the room, so we don't know. But it's very obvious. Of course, they're trying to free up cap space. Now, would you have rather had Ole Mata over Jake Walman? Yeah, I would have. But you know what? Ole Mata's cap hits $2 million, not 3.4. Well, what's the big deal? It's a big deal. Watch our part 1 video at our podcast episode. It's on the channel. Watch the free agent preview. It is a big deal. They again, with the cap space that they have, that they're going to have to give close to likely 15 million of that cap space just to Raven and Sider alone. I've heard people say, go after Bertuzzi. Why? Why would you go after Tyler Bertuzzi? Doesn't even want to be in Detroit, folks. He doesn't want to be here.
We don't need to see him here again.
Fan
favorite. Don't need to see him here again. Why would you? What did he do here? How is he better now?
Oh, he's not better now.
He didn't do anything when he was here. I mean, I don't care how good you thought he was. We didn't do anything while he was here. We didn't do anything while he was here.
No,
we didn't help.
He flashed the 30 goals, and that was nice. Like I said, I don't dislike Tyler Bertuzzi, but it's just like I think it's pretty obvious he didn't want to play in Detroit.
Don't need to see him here again.
And if he's going to come, you ain't getting $5 million a year for what? You're a third, fourth line. I mean, mind you, he had a stint with Matthews in Toronto for a little bit there, but at the end of the day, no, that's not the answer. That's not what they need. And yeah, he's feisty and physical. He's feisty and physical, but he's not a guy that you're concerned about out there that's going to finish a check. But the Red Wings need a scorer. If they're not going to get Patrick Kane, they need to take that money and go after someone that's going to be money out there. And I mean money. Put the puck in the net or help Alex DeBrincat and Dylan Larkin do it. Because it was very obvious. Just giving Dylan Larkin help from DeBrincat made them both really good. Adding Patrick Kane to the mix, that changed the dynamic of the team.
And that brings it right back, I guess, in a culminating point is we're talking about a draft in a couple of days here that's going to certainly help the organization down the road, for sure. At a time in which hopefully we're a little bit more fruitful at the NHL level and could certainly use one of these players' talents at that time to fortify what is hopefully a Stanley Cup run.
Yeah.
But the big moves that are yet to be made are going to be made after Friday. Unless we pull off some sort of blockbuster trade.
Never know.
Which could happen.
You never know.
It is likely to come in the form of a free agent signing. I do believe the Red Wings are positioning themselves to do this. I know we covered the bases, and I know the educated fan is going to have to look at the contracts of Lucas Raymond, Moritz Seider, guys like Dave Perron, and others, and add the money up to see what we can afford. We are probably going to be in better financial situation next year. Really, we're going to build. If we can look at building our roster with 2 more substantial free agent signings that aren't 1-year deals next year, and this year and next year, and then the following year, talk about maybe adding in a player, from this draft into the 7 through 12 area or the third pair defenseman, of something of that nature, with the goaltenders that we're building and the cultivation of some of the other players and seasoning. Now we're talking about a team that maybe, hey, we can make that run into the Stanley Cup Finals and be a Florida Panthers. So I mean, that's obviously the goal. We know Stevie Y wants to do this, and all of Red Wing Nation and Hockey Town wants it back. We are going to take a crack at it on Friday, and with faith behind our team, we're going to get there once again. Drew, phenomenal work, my friend. Phenomenal work. It was fun doing these 2 episodes with you. We have a new Detroit Piston. His name is Ron Holland III. We took a G League wing with the Pistons' 5th pick. I know Dylan Klingen from Connecticut was there, but we passed on the 7'2", 280-pound center to go for a wing shooter, guy that's a good athlete and can 3-and-D things a little bit. So that's the Red Wing tidbit here, folks. If you watch this here in a couple of hours, that's what we got with the Pistons, and we will see who we have down the pipeline this coming up Friday. For David Drzezinski, my name is Andy Scheel. This is the Sports Peninsula Podcast. Let's go Red Wings.
This has been the Sports Peninsula Podcast. To subscribe to the podcast, simply click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel's homepage and give us a like. You can also follow our audio podcast on multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts, just to name a few. Give us a follow on Twitter. Our handle is @SportsPPodcast to check out our latest releases. Thank you again for watching and for your support. Remember, when you want to hear all about sports in the great state of Michigan, there is only one Sports Peninsula Podcast.